Well, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good night, whenever you're actually watching this. But as you know, this is First Tuesday. And this one's a little bit special because for the first time, we've gone international. That's why we are not at the usual 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. Because the guest that I've got on today, and I'll be honest with you, I've been so excited about getting him on, is in Singapore. So, for him to be chatting with us at 10:30 in the morning, he would have had to have got up very, very early in the morning. And as much as he loves us, let's be honest, everyone needs our beauty sleep. So I'm going to be introducing you to a guy, and I want to just let it know, first off, how I actually came across him. So when you're doing a podcast, everyone comes at you, they give you guests, and they're like, hey, you got it. And we had a friend of ours, Dan, that said, oh, you got to speak to this guy called Nir Eyal. He's got this book. It's called Hooked. Talks about triggers, talks about, and I'm being very blasé about it, talks about triggers, talks about how corporations get you committed and I suppose addicted to that product and service. And I thought, yeah, this would be a good guest because, it's great, but I've heard it before. We've all had the Gary V, hook, jab. Joe Sugarman came out with a great one called Triggers. Jay Abraham talks about it. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's great. And I got his book. Did the podcast, great guest. Got the book, didn't read it. Henry got the book, walked into my room one day, slammed it on the desk and said, you got to read this book. And he's never done that. He's never, ever told me I've got to read a book. He's never even suggested a book to me. So it makes it sound like I'm pumping this up, but I freaking am. So this was the book that he stuck on my desk and he said, you got to read it. And I said, why? And he said quite openly, this was written for you. You can understand it. And all of the other books tell me what addiction is, tells me what the commitment is, tells me how companies actually get me involved. But I'll be honest with you, this one actually gave me the matrix. This one gave me the blueprint. This one didn't tell me what they were doing to me. This one actually told me behind the scenes how to do it. And so we all like the how-tos. It was a fantastic book. I was hooked, shall we say. And then what I did is I reached out to him. Now, I hadn't stayed in contact, and he had every reason to turn around and go, Steve Sims, who? But he didn't. He admitted that it would be great to jump on. And so he's going to be jumping on. So I'm going to bring Nair in. Let me bring him in. 3, 2, 1, as they say. Nair, how are you, pal? Thanks for coming.
Of course. It's great to see you again.
It's been a while. What has it been, about a year?
It's been a while. Yeah, it has been a bit. And I remember when I first met you, you're like, yeah, exactly like you said. Okay, sounds like a great book. Yep, okay, I'll read it. Won't.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you got a chance to check it out.
Oh no, it was, as I said to you before we came on, to be polite to the other books that I can't remember at the moment. This one is definitely in my top 5, and I can't remember 3 of those top 5. So. If anybody hasn't read this book, and we're going to be going in because I know you've got another book out now, but if anyone hasn't read it, I am going to totally endorse this and say that you've got to get involved. It changed certain things that I did that I'm going to be revealing to my speakeasy crowd in a couple of weeks. But first of all, what is the premise of the book? What is being hooked all about?
Yeah, so the idea is, how do we build habit-forming products? And so my idea was, I happened to be at the right place at the right time. That I graduated from Stanford Graduate School of Business in 2008, and this was a great time to be in Silicon Valley. I started a company, and many of my clients and customers were people who were building these word-changing companies, the companies that would become Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Slack and Snapchat. I was at the epicenter of these companies really hitting their stride. And my question was, how do they do it? How do they get us hooked? And my idea wasn't to educate them. They know these techniques. They've known them for decades. When you think about the social media companies, the video game companies, they've known how to do this for years. My idea was, how do we democratize those techniques? How can we make any sort of product or service the kind of product or service that people use because they want to, not because they have to? How can we turn these products and services into habits? And that's exactly what's happened over the past, the book's published in 2014. So over the past 6 years or so, companies in every conceivable industry, Kahoot uses the hook model to get kids hooked onto in-classroom learning. The company is the biggest educational company in the world. They're worth over $1.3 billion. They just went public. I remember talking to the founder when they first started saying, hey, here's how we're going to use the hook model. Companies like Fitbod get people into the habit. They get people hooked to exercise. Companies all over the world that are using this psychology, this basic 4-step model that I describe in my book to get people hooked to all kinds of healthy habits.
All right, so let's look at the companies out there. What would you, if you were to give an example of a company that's done very well at getting us hooked, who would you pick?
Take your pick. What do you seem to get hooked to? Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, in the enterprise space, Slack, Salesforce, GitHub. I mean, take your pick. What kind of product do you use most often that you find yourself getting hooked to?
Well, the one that I actually have a love-hate for is my iPhone, because I've got a smart home. I don't want people bothering me with a text, a WhatsApp, or an email at 8 o'clock at night. But if I don't have the phone near me, then I don't know if anyone's at my gate delivering food, or I don't know if anyone's on the Nest system, or I can't control the thermostat. So I'd have to probably say my iPhone app, my iPhone.
Sure. Great example. So whether it's Apple or Google or Amazon or Facebook, what we find at the core of the user experience of every single one of these products and services is the 4 steps of the hook model. Now, here's how the hook model works. Now, by the way, to clarify, they didn't build these products with the hook model in mind. These companies came well before my work. What I did was to codify what are the similarities? What do we see repeated time and time again, right? Unplugging the matrix, as you say. How can we see the matrix for what it is to see, oh, here are the 4 steps that we see every time we experience one of these products. So for example, with your iPhone. So here's the 4 steps of the hook model. So every hook starts with a trigger.